Last week, I asked you guys on Twitter to give your ban list prediction takes. I honestly have a lot on my mind regarding a possible ban list in the future, but I really wanted to hear what the community currently thinks needs to be hit on a Forbidden and Limited list. So I want to check out these takes and respond to them with my own. And of course, as always, if you're not following me on Twitter, you are missing out. If you're a Twitter user, head over to Twitter in the link in the description below. And before we begin, like the video, subscribe, and let's dive in to your 2024 ban list takes. So first of all, we have Maxim Solemn. You know him as Solemn Yu-Gi-Oh! Saying original Sinful Spoils to 0 is the only correct take. I think that this is probably one of the major things that people are talking about. A card that is highly searchable with a variety of one-card starters and also provides an incredible advantage. While I think that banning original Sinful Spoils is a bit early, I do agree that the card is one of the problematic cards. But I honestly don't think that this is the most problematic card at the moment. What banning this does is cutting you off from different engines that are not Snake Eye. Because if you saw how pure Snake Eye play, especially with the field spell, they don't really need to use original unless they open specifically Diabellstar. What banning this does is no longer making Diabellstar a starter, which means that 6 cards in your deck, usually, especially in pure, just instantly die. It's a very, very severe hit. It kind of eliminates things like Rescue Ace and Fire Kings as well, because you cannot go into a Hydrant or a Ponix anymore. It just cancels that out immediately. So while I can see this happening in the future, specifically also being like an ultra rare card that is not expensive at all, I think it might be a little bit too aggressive and too early. Jared said, ban Flamberge. And I think I do agree with this much more than I do with banning original Sinful Spoils. I think that Flamberge is much more of an unfair card that provides so much more advantage. So if you're not extremely aware of what it actually does, is that essentially it will replace itself with 2 other bodies. It allows you to get an interruption. It allows you to extend, but it also allows you not to die most of the time. So it can play around Nibiru, because if you Nibiru at a certain point, you summon back 2 more bodies, and you can link them from there to Promethean Princess, summon back the Flamberge, and it's completely disruptive. Removing it from the field means that your opponent will summon 3 monsters and get 2 searches out of those monsters, which is insane. It's absolutely insane. It's impossible to clear boards. Now, while this card seems tame because its effect is like, it's not an interruption on its own, it definitely provides almost an unfair amount of advantage. So I think I definitely kind of agree with this, and I can definitely see this happening. It's not a generic card. It's specifically for Snake Eyes, but the extension it provides is just way too much powerful. Apollo says bring Kit Kalos to 1, maybe even 2, since Millers and Shufflers are gone. Now, Shufflers are not gone, to be honest. They are still in the game. I think Millers were definitely the power of the Tearlaments deck. It was the main source of power, but you have to remember that Kit Kalos on its own makes the Tearlaments strategy a lot more brutal, because unlike in the OCG or Master Duel even, we have Rhinos at 3, Pearl Rhinos at 3, we have Tearlaments Kashtira at 3, so you are still going to mill 8 much more consistently. You're going to be searching a trap card from your deck, which is kind of hard to do if you don't hit a Scream. So while I think it's going to be an interesting experiment, I think bringing Kit to 1 could be dangerous. If they don't touch Snake Eyes at all, I'm kind of down to bring back Kit Kalos to 1 for 1 format and just, get it twisted and see what it does. Ban Linkaroo and limit Flamberge. I think that's a fair take. We're going to discuss Linkaroo in a second. I do want to discuss banning Sanctifier Dragon. So, banning Linkaroo, first let's get this out of the way. I think Linkaroo should not be paying the sins of the Snake Eye deck. Being level 1s, naturally, this is really good. But if you hit the extenders of the deck, it hits the deck much more fairly without just banning a really fun and useful card in Linkaroo. Linkaroo was totally tame and definitely not a problem when the Snake Eyes cards came out. That's when it became a little bit of a problem, but I would say that just Snake Eyes Ash is much more powerful than that. Now, Sanctifier, I'm going to address this because I think it's also in the thumbnail, because I've been playing Branded a lot. I've been playing Branded a lot in this format. I think banning Sanctifier is something that a lot of people will assume that could possibly happen. But in reality, I do think that Gimmick Puppet Nightmare should be the one banned. Now, I'll explain this because you're going to say right now, you're going to go to the comment section and say, hey, there's a ton more targets. You can summon Ra's Disciple. You can summon Edo, the Supreme Magical Force. But Gimmick Puppet Nightmare is an extremely unfair card when it hits you the board. Now, if you're talking about something like Edo, the Supreme Magical Force, that is even better against Fluenderies and stuff like that, you can remove it from the field in a lot of ways. You can use cards like Dark Hole, Enemy Controller, anything that tributes basically, to get rid of it, and you can still play. And with Branded not being even near the top of the meta right now, because we're kind of in a tier 0 format, I said this a long time ago, Sanctifier's mechanic is potentially toxic. If you ban Gimmick Puppet Nightmare, it makes it a lot less worth it to play it. Maybe Sanctifier is the way, but I really don't want to see this card banned, because anything other than Gimmick Puppet Nightmare I think is definitely manageable. Harp to 3, Crossout to 1, Linkaroo to 0. Now, Harp to 3, I suppose could happen. I can definitely see that happening at some point. I don't think it's needed at the moment. It could go to 2. We are seeing Orcus doing kind of nothing, and I'm not sure that Harp at 3 is even better than Harp at 1. I mean, all you need is to just send 1, and you have so much cards that can do that right now. And even with Harp at 1, the deck is nowhere near its power level in toss format. It's power crept to death, and the interruptions that it provides are really not doing enough. Honestly, Harp to 3 will probably not matter. Now, Crossout to 1, that's something I definitely wanted to talk about. I think Crossout is definitely an unfair and also very unimaginative and unfun card. Now, in a format where everybody hand traps each other to death, which is where we're at right now, Crossout is extremely toxic because you can just, circumvent that fact that everybody plays hand traps and just play it out to any hand trap or any card. People are even playing Crossout to out things like Triple Tactics Talent, and it's just extremely unfair to be able to, hit any card from your opponent's deck and just negate it. Crossout at 1 is currently at 1 in the OCG because of Max C mainly, just so Max C can really thrive and shape the format. Honestly, I'm going to go out here and say Crossout to 1 is a very reasonable and solid take in my opinion. General take, we can probably release half the cards on the Forbidden and Limited list and it wouldn't change anything in the meta, which is completely true. Their take is ban original Sinful Spoils and limit Snake Eye Ash. I think limiting Snake Eye Ash, definitely okay. Might be a little bit too early, but I think it's a fair hit because the card provides everything. It's a plus 1000. Releasing cards is always the fact, but Konami always tends to go more on the safe side. Even though we just saw in the last ban list, they're going a little bit crazy. So if the format is extremely power crept anyway, take some cards off the ban list. I'm sure you can get like 10 unbans easily, and it's not going to change a thing. Mira says, I genuinely believe that Red Reboot could go to 1. Honestly, in this format, I'm not even sure that it's the case. And we need to talk about the floodgates that we're dealing with now in order to figure out whether that's the right call or not. I think that Anti-Spell Fragrance and, of course, Summon Limit should go to 1. Those are the correct hits for both of them. The same thing that they did with Rivalry goes in match, and there can be only 1. But, and there's a huge but here, I think that Summon Limit has really not seen play in a very long time. It's a very toxic and powerful card. Will they actually do it? I'm not 100% sure, but I would really love to see them do that because I don't think that Summon Limit is any different from Vanity's Emptiness. It's the same freaking card. I don't care what anybody says. The fact that with the Snake Eye cards in the Abelstar, you can out your own Floodgate by just tributing it to summon something from the deck. It's completely absurd, and you don't want people to abusing the power of those cards. Same thing with Anti-Spell. It's Imperial Order. It doesn't matter at all. The fact that you can respond to it with a Cosmic, well, good luck drawing the one of 3 cosmics in your 40 or 45 card deck. It doesn't always happen, and you just auto lose. I think those cards absolutely suck, and hopefully should go to 1. But if not, let us experiment with Red Reboot. I think Red Reboot is okay. It forces you to not rely on your Floodgate back rows. It forces you to diversify your style of play, because if you're only relying on traps, it's the same thing as like having summon limit. If I rely on summoning monsters, why is there a legal Floodgate to prevent me from summoning? And Red Reboot is like a big no-no because it kills an entire mechanic of the deck. I don't know about that. Unleash to Peace, Masterpiece to 1. I honestly don't think anybody would care. Do it, Konami. Do it. Colossus to 1 to put fire decks in check. This is not the way to solve formats, in my opinion. If you remember, in the first Tearlaments ban list, we had Curious Ban, Snow Ban, and stuff like that, but we also had cards like Dimensional Fissure and Macro Cosmos going to 3. Konami thought that this would counter the Tearlaments deck, bring in more Floodgates to the gate, and the Graveyard deck cannot play, which is very, very far from the truth. Colossus, I think, is an extremely toxic card that should not be in the game. If you ask me about Droll and Lockbird, that card should not be in the game as well. So even though Colossus is relatively weak, using it to keep the fire decks in check might be effective, but it will definitely not be fun to play in that format. There needs to be a perfect balance, which is impossible, but bringing back a card that is toxic and was banned for that reason in order to keep a deck that will eventually get hit in check is just nonsensical. And finally, the absolutely most correct take of them all, ban World Seed Dragon Zantis. I absolutely agree that this should, and I will bet, will happen. You can add me on Twitter if it doesn't, but this will happen in the current nearest ban list. World Seed Dragon Zantis has always been a problematic card because it can manipulate the field in a way where it resets soft once per turn effects. It can get you to activate multiple effects of the same card per turn. It manipulates your opponent field so you can control the attack position and if cards are face up or face down. And now it enables a very, very obnoxious FTK or OTK that I think is completely unfair. I think the Snake Eye cards can go and run and do their part in the metagame, but the fact that if you can stick 2 bodies on the field means your opponent dies, unheard of. I think it's completely degenerate and toxic and even stupid that this card is legal. I would say that this one, I would bet my bottom dollar that this will happen, and if it doesn't happen, it means that the Snake Eye cards really got a severe hit. I want to hear your guys' takes in the comments below. What ban list predictions are you looking at right now? Even though I'm gonna say maybe the format doesn't necessarily need it immediately, but at least ban the toxic cards, ban Zantis, ban Gimmick Puppet, let the decks play in a more fair way. Hopefully that happens. Leave your comments below, like the video, subscribe to the channel. Of course, follow on Twitter because, you know, we have a lot of fun over there. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.